welcome you back to Friday at 5, our weekly show where we focus on issues that matter to all of us in a combined way. Today we have a great show, but before I get on to that, let me also make an announcement. We are starting a new feature within Friday at 5. So right at the end of the show at 6 p.m. sharp, we will share the link to a quiz. Now this is a 5-question quiz because we want to see if all of you are awake and listening to us, or are we just talking to our own computer screens? So these 5 questions will be based on the topic that we are going to be discussing today, which is Chapter 5, Articles 5.15 onwards. And there is an incentive also. This is going to be a graded multiple choice quiz, and the first person who gets a 5 out of 5 gets a free surprise gift mailed to his house or to the school, to her school, compliments of ICSL. So I do want you that remember this at 6 p.m. There's going to be a link in the chat. Click on it, fill up the form, and answer the 5 questions pertaining to what you have heard today or the articles of the policy. Having said that, let me quickly introduce our speakers. We could not have had better speakers today, since we are going to be talking about continuous professional development of teachers. We are going to be talking about how to help teachers build a new career, their career progression management. We are also going to be talking about the performance standards for teachers. We have with us 2 people who have passionately devoted their lives into this domain. Mrs. Vinita Kher is with us. She is the former director of the HRD Center for DPS Society, and during her careers, I think she has trained almost every teacher in the DPS family, and also all the principals. So she brings to us a very, very rich experience and insights into professional development of teachers and how NEP proposes the changes that would take place. We also have with us Mrs. Maya Menon. She is the founder director of the Teacher Foundation, where she works extensively with teachers in schools and school leaders both, and offering them training programs in multiple fields. So I think we're going to have a great discussion. And without wasting too much time, we are also changing the format slightly of Friday at 5. So this is going to be a lot more interactive, with me posing questions to our panelists, our speakers, our guests. And then in the end, half an hour, we'll take up questions that you have for either Mrs. Vinita Kher or for Maya Menon or for me. So if you have questions, just keep them writing down somewhere, raise your hand, and we will definitely invite you to ask your question. So without taking too much time, let me just quickly move over to our topics of the day. The first article, which we have, 5.15, talks about continuous professional development. Now, my view towards continuous professional development, before I pose some questions, I just want to share what I feel. So when I started teaching mathematics, this was in 1989, and I started teaching at DPS Mathura Road. That was my first teaching assignment right after I finished my master's in mathematics. And at that point, whenever I used to walk out of the class after taking a lecture, and this was classes 11th and 12th that I was teaching, I would feel like a superhero. I assumed that whatever I had taught was absolutely understood by each and every student in my class. Because I was the best, and therefore there was no question of me improving. And I felt that every lecture that I gave was pretty amazing. And there was no introspection. There was no reflection on my teaching for that particular day. Now, when I moved to America and I started teaching there, and I taught the first year students and the second year students, that is when I learned a very simple trick. 2 questions after every lecture. Spend 10 minutes reflecting on your lecture and ask yourself what went right, what were you happy about. And that's what I used to do. So after taking every lecture, I used to come back to my office. Every graduate student had an office there. And I would ask myself, okay, so what went well? What was I happy about in this particular lecture? And I also asked a second question: what would I like to change? In my next lecture, what are the things that I would like to improve upon? Now, this practice of asking 2 questions, writing down sometimes helps in the beginning, that what you felt was right and what you felt needs to improve in the next lecture. For me, this is continuous professional development. You are reflecting, you are thinking about your lectures as you move along, and that's more continuous. When we say that, look, we need to train our teachers for 50 hours every year, and this could be, right at the beginning of an academic year. Most schools have that practice, that before starting an academic year, they make every teacher go through some training programs for 8 days. And then for the rest, 357 days, we don't need to worry about it because we have already spent 8 days in training. That seems to me more like a regular professional development rather than continuous professional development. And I would really think that if we as teachers take upon ourselves the onus of improving our practice, just like a doctor would do, just like a lawyer would do, if we find that we are responsible for our own improvement, then a good continuous professional development at an individual level possibly is the best solution. However, the government has the policy, the national education policy, talks about a certain number of hours for every teacher. And that brings me to the very first question for Vinita ma'am. What I would like to ask you, Vinita ji, is that since the policy talks about a minimum of 50 hours of CPD, first, and given the fact that they have so much to learn in this policy, do you feel that 50 hours of professional development is adequate for teachers, given the fact how much they have to learn? And if not, in your judgment, what should be the kind of time that should be invested in developing teachers professionally? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Atul. First of all, let me congratulate you for having a program like this called Let's Meet Every Week, Friday at 5. I think I've attended programs every week, and I've found that there's been a platform of a lot of understanding of the NEP 2020. It's indeed a huge document, and it takes a while for all of us to understand. Regarding this question that you put up, I think teaching is a 365 days, 24-hour job. And to say that we're going to limit it to, say, so many hours, 50 hours or 8 days in a year, I think is a little far-fetched. We need to have a system whereby teachers, without feeling the pressure, without feeling the burden, have to be a part of a training which is right through and through all the time. And therefore, it is a suggestion to all school heads and all teachers that they train. If, for instance, if the CBSE or the NCERT or the school has designed some kind of a training for a few hours a month or a few hours a week, a teacher should take it themselves as an onus to train by themselves. And how do they train? Like you said, you would return to your office and prepare a questionnaire to understand if training, if the lesson you had thought was satisfactory, what needed further to be improved. So what I suggest is that teachers take on the onus of creating this continuous professional development themselves. Principals, along with teachers, um, take it again together to create this learning themselves. It could be in any which way or subject based, it could be theme based, it could be anywhere. So therefore, there is much to be done. If we narrow it down to few hours or few days of training, I think is a little difficult to understand, because teaching is a growing profession, it's an evolving profession. And all teachers and students must co-learn together, and therefore learning is very necessary. Continuous evolvement, evolution is necessary for teachers all the time.
Thank you so much. I think that's a brilliant, way to put at it, because a lot of times what we feel is that schools, um, only try to meet the minimum required mandate set by a policy. And I think what you're saying is we need to go beyond that minimum, number of hours and make it a habit rather than just follow a directive of the policy. Maya, I have a question for you. You have looked at the entire policy, and you've been doing teacher, training for a very long time. What are some of the new areas or the challenging aspects of the profession where you feel that teachers will need to invest time and effort in their professional development?
I think that's a very important key question, especially in connection with the new education policy. I think the COVID crisis, perhaps the one good thing, and I say good thing in this very difficult, chaotic time that schools, teachers, school principals are dealing with, is the fact that this pandemic has suddenly, put teaching on its head. And this forces all of us as educators to rethink how teaching has to be done. Because teachers and teaching as a profession they're very slow to change. I've been personally involved with professional development programs, working with teachers in the classroom, outside for many years, over 20 years. And I find that despite even the most well-intentioned teacher finds it difficult to change. Now, this has got teachers to jump in deep end, which means that you either have to sink or swim. And obviously, we want all our teachers to swim and swim gloriously, which means that if you have to look at what are the things teachers have to learn, they have to realize that they have to bin all these old practices, which are time tested, but completely archaic. We have to get out of our exam-oriented, rote-based teaching, which we have to adopt, of course, the new digital tools, which many teachers have been willy-nilly using these last 4-5 months. But they have to get better at it, because it's not just about knowing how to use these digital tools. It's still about good pedagogy. It is still about student engagement. It's still about helping children make meaning. So teachers actually have to learn constantly. And since you talked about continuous professional development, teaching is an extremely difficult, complex job. I didn't know that in my early 20s when I began teaching. I know that now. And one should not have to wait several decades before you realize how complex and how difficult teaching is. And you will know that only if you keep delving into your own practice. I like what you said, Atul, that you talked about asking yourself, it is about being a reflective teacher. What went well? What could I have done better? How could I have done that better? And so on. These are important questions that teachers have to ask. So I think, to sum up, you have to be comfortable with digital tools, but not just getting fluent in using the tools, but using it with meaning so that students are engaged and students are learning. NEP talks a lot about critical thinking. There are at least 8 mentions of critical thinking in the document, even though teacher educator does not come in incidentally when you do a search. Critical thinking, and if you can't do critical thinking unless the teachers are equipped to develop in children critical thinking skills. So teachers have to learn a gamut of skills. So I think the time is ripe and good for teachers and teaching to truly transform the profession. I'll stop there.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Maya. And I have one more question for you. So, you know what, when I started conducting programs for math teachers on mathematical thinking, how to develop mathematical thinking,
Yeah.
you know, what I found was that a lot of our teachers themselves, math teachers themselves, had not been exposed to mathematical thinking. And therefore, they were not really equipped to, to, to help students think mathematically. Okay. So I think the same thing goes with critical thinking that we just have said. There are 2 steps. First is our teachers need to learn how to think critically. And then after that, they need to find ways to incorporate critical thinking in the learning experiences that they deliver. So how long do you think, you know, this process would take for the teacher to learn and then to figure out how to help kids learn critical?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's another great question, Atul. There's a lot of research from across the world that says teachers teach the way they have been taught. And the way teachers have been taught has been very didactic, has been archaic. And that's what even though they've been taught about, you know, student-centered learning, 21st century learning and so on, they're taught in a very didactic way. And so that's their only reality. So I would never blame teachers. We have to provide teachers opportunities to learn these skills, which means that in professional development programs and opportunities, CPD, whenever they have opportunities to learn, they have to experience a different kind of learning for themselves. When they experience it, then there's an aha moment. Okay, this makes sense. Maybe I can try it out with my children in my classroom, whether virtual classroom or physical classroom. So first of all, they have to experience it for themselves. You're absolutely right. Mathematical thinking or scientific thinking, unless teachers themselves experience that, they are not going to be able to develop those skills in children. So I think that is one important aspect that we have to be focusing on professional development, that teachers have to experience. And how much time will it take, to answer your question? I think you can't just do training sessions. You have to handhold the teacher in the classroom or in the virtual classroom or in the physical classroom. It doesn't, you have to help it become embedded practice for the teacher. You can't just learn something and say, okay, I can do it. So they need help. They try it out. It's like learning to ride a bicycle or a car. You fall down a few times. It doesn't work. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't ride a bicycle or that bicycle riding is not good, but you learn and you get more fluent after trying out and somebody is supporting you. So I hold a lot of onus on importance of coaching and mentoring of teachers in their practice, site-based in their school, apart from just attending training sessions.
I think that's a very valuable point, and that brings us actually to 5.16, the next article, because the only person who can mentor teachers to develop these skills and guide teachers on how to develop these skills is the school leader. The policy also talks about, the school leaders should be going for 50, at least 50 hours of professional development. Now, Vinita ma'am, you have, a rich experience in conducting programs both for principals as well as for teachers. Now, I don't know what your experience has been in terms of the level of seriousness, but I feel that sometimes, when you become a principal, you feel I know it all because I'm the king of the jungle now. How easy it is to motivate principals to take their own professional development seriously.
See, Abdul, uh, principals per se have a lot of work. It's like I said, it's a 365 days, 24 hours task. And therefore, they're always on the run with new policies coming in, not just this NEP, but there's an everyday, information coming in, some new tasks being assigned to school principals. So therefore, they're all the time, they're consistently on a job all the time. To motivate them, it's not difficult. You just need to have a good program, a well-tailored, well-made program. And to draw out a principal from the school indeed is difficult because there's always a responsibility. But then I've seen it in my experience that if you have designed a good program, an engaging program where uh, we've handheld principles, we've discussed, and we've been together. I think all principals have they found it motivating and they've engaged themselves very easily. It really hasn't been a difficult task. In fact, right now I am together with principals each evening at a program, and I find that if you really reach out to them, if you talk to them, of instances of daily challenges of what really troubles them. They they um, they engage well, they connect well. So therefore, I think it is really not difficult. They're easily motivated, and they're all fervent. They're they're desirous of understanding what is happening in the system today. And today, when COVID takes us by storm, I think all principals are you know, right at the forefront to understand what is the change that is happening right now and what needs to be done. And indeed, for them, it is a very challenging time. And they're trying to understand technology has taken us by storm. And I've spoken to a lot of principals from within the DPS system, without the DPS system, and the teachers are finding it difficult. So for them to coach their teachers to understand what technology is all about, how to teach with technology, indeed is a difficult time, and they've been able to do it. So therefore, whatever it is, it's hats off to the principals and the teachers for holding each other's hand and taking COVID and teaching through technology very well. Whichever way they're doing it right now, I think it has to be appreciated.
Ma'am, one other question that I was thinking of when you were speaking, because you mentioned technology a lot and how we have transitioned into technology really fast. Now, till now, most of the training programs that were conducted in India, say till the last year or till March, were all face-to-face interactions.
Yes.
And now, if we look at, even if we look at the small portion of private school body, which is 350,000 schools, and we need to deliver 50 hours of training a minimum 50 hours of training to each principal. So that means 50 hours for 350,000 people. I don't think that would be possible in a face-to-face environment. Now, you have led a very successful program where everybody came to the HRD center in Dwarka, and they would go through a training program, a residence training program. Do you feel that the online trainings would be as effective as a face-to-face training, or would there be a trade-off somewhere? And then how can we balance that trade-off?
They're two different things. when you mentioned the face-to-face program versus the online programs, face-to-face programs were designed in such a way that it was not just subject-centered. If you look at the principles of the fundamental principles, you'll understand that teaching is not just subject teaching. And before me, Maya mentioned that it's a very complex task. Teaching is indeed a very complex, very difficult situation. And it is transactional between two individuals or an individual with a whole lot of students around you. And therefore, if you look at the fundamental principles, it talks about creativity and critical thinking. It talks about ethics and human constitutional values like empathy, respect. All these were taken into the training program. The training program did not just talk about teaching mathematics or teaching English language or teaching Hindi. It was all, it was completely, it encompassed the curriculum, it encompassed value systems, confidence, how do teachers speak before a peer group rather than just students. So therefore, that face-to-face program was different. Today, when you speak of technology, that's a little different again. It's going to have its own characteristics. You might be able to teach an online program takes time to understand, but if well planned, you can reach out to a mentor on the other side. There could be a teacher on the other side. It takes a little while, but I'm sure at the end of it, it's not difficult. It can be managed. Of course,
Great.
face-to-face has a completely different color to it. And I have seen teachers through a 5-day program or a 10-day program completely change because they came from different places, far away places where there was no communication. People found it difficult to read. And coming to Delhi all the way itself is an education, traveling from one place to another. Two is meeting people on a platform where you interact with 50 different people from 50 different schools is a completely new learning experience. And therefore, they are two different, completely in, the identity of the programs, but doesn't matter. I think with COVID having come and technology having taken us by storm, it's a welcome change.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And I hope that the online programs also evolve over a period of time and they become more effective and there is more human element and social element involved in those programs. Let me move on to the next article, which is career management and progression. This is Article 5.7 in the policy. Now, this, I think, article for the first time talks about creating a merit-based structure for making teachers permanent tenures, promotion of teachers, as well as salary incentives. So my question, Maya, to you is, do you think that with a transparent, unbiased structure being followed by schools, teachers would get motivated more to perform because there is a well-defined performance assessment system in place? Maya, can you hear me?
So I think, yeah, I can hear you. So the most popular form of tenured track or tenured teachers is the government school teacher. And they're secure, their jobs are safe, they get a good salary, especially central government scales, state government scales are not too bad either compared to the private school teachers. But has that really improved the quality? I don't think so. We've seen decades of that, in our country, and that's been the tragedy of our education system. So I'm personally not sure about tenure as a way of motivating teachers. I think we have to be looking at, helping teachers evolve, grow as individuals and professionals in their own right, who take pride in their profession and want to do a good job for that. I always I ask teachers questions and principals also when they say, oh, but if our profession was better paid, we would get better people. So I counter that question: would better pay fetch us better teachers, or will better teachers fetch us better pay? And generally, they tend to see the latter. Because if you are really an excellent cadre of teachers, why shouldn't any school or any government pay you what you're due? And I think teachers must be paid better, but it should not be that secure my job, only then will I perform. I don't think that's the case. I think you need to perform because the job demands it. It's a moral, ethical, requirement, just like in the medical profession, that you do a good job. Children's lives are at stake. And I think keeping that in mind, teachers should be paid on par with any other demanding profession.
But should the salary structure be based on seniority or merit as assessed by some sort of a transparent system?
I think it has to be a case of, it's more complex than that. For instance, if there's a group of teachers and all of them are vying for, say, a coordinator's post or a school leader's post because school leader is retiring, you may need to have a combination, and maybe you have to give a weightage for certain things. So you need to definitely look at competence. You need to look at seniority, because you can't get somebody who's just been 2 years in the school, but who's really competent, because then eventually they have to get into somebody else's shoes who's been in the school for 15 years or 20 years and so on. So I think it's a little bit more complex than that. I think you need to look at competence and merit. Absolutely, you need to look at some level that the person has been able to hold sort of work many years in this profession. And of course, one has to look at some special qualities or unique selling propositions that this candidate brings into this position. I think it has to be a combination of several things, not just one thing.
Yeah, so it has to consider a lot of factors before you start doing that. Vinita ma'am, I had one question. Now, if you look at, the quality of teachers, we all agree that if we look at nationwide scenario, then we do not have excellent quality teachers in every town, in every school, especially the budget schools when they are situated in smaller towns. We don't get very good teachers there, and they keep, fighting to figure out how to get good teachers. Now, the policy also says that there's going to be an assessment of teachers. Now, would that assessment conducted on a regular basis for promotions, for increasing salaries, would that create a scare in teachers, or would it help them, focus more on their professional development?
Initially, it could be a little apprehensive. It would be taken with apprehension. Mm-hmm. And I think over the years, if teachers were coached and mentored on why such assessment was taking place, I think they would concentrate more on their profession. Give it to them. Teachers don't like change. No one likes change that happens. And if there is an assessment, it is for the betterment. And if it is for the betterment, the school has to provide opportunity to teachers for CPD, further professional development, and I'm sure teachers will fit in very well, and they'll do their best. They will. You'll have to provide them opportunities. Give them those opportunities, and I'm sure they'll do well.
So I think we'll have to win the confidence of teachers that it's good for them, and then take it forward from there.
They'll do it well.
Yeah. So one more question I had from you actually was that in our system, there was always a bias between senior teachers who taught 11th and 12th, and the primary teachers who taught classes 1, 2, and 3. Somehow the schools gave more recognition to senior teachers. Senior teachers got more respect. They got more opportunities to do things, while the primary school teachers were just considered not equivalent to the senior school teachers. Now, the policy actually talks about creating a career progression within each stage of education. Will that somewhere help us to bring the dignity of all teachers at par with each other?
See, first of all, I think teaching is a job that requires a lot of courage. All teachers should be recognized, whichever level they are at. And I think with the policy coming in, this is the time when the dignity of teachers should be, raised, first of all, in society, one, and two, their levels. Um, like you just said, that, somewhere the senior teachers were given a little more importance. Teachers teaching classes 9, 10, 11, and 12. I think this is the right time now to create this importance for pre-nursery, the early childhood, and the nursery teachers, plus classes 1 to 5, the early elementary, and also the later elementary, because that's the foundation. And teachers there deserve to be noticed. They deserve to be taken very, very seriously, because that's where the foundation of the student is being created and being nurtured. So therefore, I think it's high time that we look at these levels again, and we also understand teacher development at all these levels. So therefore, I hope that the policy creates this, and people who are responsible for creating a PGT and a TGT and the primary level at this point should give it more thought, and see that all teachers right across the school are given their due respect and the due regard, and also their salaries. When we're talking about salaries, also this. And it's important right now to understand that teachers need to be raised. Their dignity ought to be raised. Their levels ought to be raised. Their respect and regard ought to be raised. This is the time. This is the right time. COVID has brought it into picture, and all of us have seen how teachers have struggled to rise to the occasion. And now that the policy is going to be discussed further next year and year after next, I think this is the time to give teachers the right due.
I think, ma'am, a lot of teachers are going to be very envious of the wonderful background that you have. They must be feeling, jealous that you are at such a great location.
Thank you.
And enjoying the snow, and where we are all here, suffering in Delhi's heat. But just one question before I open the platform for audience to ask their questions. Now, this is a usual practice within schools, private schools, that the school leader or the principal is usually appointed on the basis of seniority. Now, with Article 5.19 coming into place, do you think that seniority would lose some of its, importance in deciding who the next principal would be?
It's a tough question. It's a very tough question. See, usually teachers who rise up to seniority are selected as principals, but also the trend for appointing principals from the outside, more qualified, is also, I think, visible now. I don't think there is a problem in appointing someone from the outside.
Okay, so that's a great thing. I would invite anybody who wants to ask a question, just raise your hand. And in the meantime, when you guys register, we ask you to fill up a form where you submit questions. I'm going to take up a few questions from there because a lot of times these questions are not related to what we are discussing. But I've selected a few questions. And I think this one is from Maya. This is asked by Suganya Daniel from Bengaluru. Who will be the deciding authority for teacher fitness or excellence? and what will be the guiding rubrics for excellent teachers? Because quality is relative, we may not get far without tying it down to absolutes. Maya, do you want to take up that question?
Yes, sure, Atul. I think if you're looking at what are the rubrics based on which you check on teacher competence, maybe if you have a good TET, and I think the teacher eligibility test must be enhanced and improved. That is one indication. There has to be an ongoing case of observation and conversations within the school to see how teachers are performing, how teachers are doing their job, what are the difficulties teachers face. I think the culture of conversation, professional conversations that happen in the school is truly indicative of which teachers are performing better, and also culture of sharing good practice and so on, because through that it just surfaces who are the good teachers, who are the teachers who are doing, not just doing their job, but are, you know, sticking their necks out and doing extra stuff. And that immediately makes visible the good teachers and the great teachers. I think it's about schools are such busy places, and they just get so caught up in the mechanical completion of portions and so on. And I think we have to provide space for teachers to congregate within schools or even virtually nowadays to discuss about their profession. And through that, it encourages teachers to put their best foot forward every single day. I always say that, I mean, and there's a lot of research from, again, John Hattie's research. Schools have to foster collective efficacy of teachers, not just individual excellence of teachers, because every teacher being excellent is what raises the standard of a school. Not just that I have a few star teachers and therefore my school is good. So I think we have to look at raising collective efficacy of every teacher has to be performing to their best every single day. That's what the children of our country deserve that.
That's an excellent answer. Anuradha Goel, I think you have raised your hand. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question? Sudhanshu, can we unmute Anuradha? Okay, Anuradha ji, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm from Bal Bharati Public School. I would like to say, like, there's a difference between the level of the teachers, say, so teachers teaching English, maths, those subjects, and somebody teaching general knowledge. Like, teacher teaching general knowledge may not get the same kind of respect. And it's like, maybe the teachers teaching art, music, they are still okay, like, because their subjects is something where you can't, it's not easy being critical about it. But somebody who's teaching GK, everybody knows what and how to teach except the GK teacher. So how can it be?
So, Vinita ma'am, you want to take it, because I agree with Anuradha. You know, sometimes as a math teacher, I used to feel that math teachers get more respect because math is supposedly a difficult subject to teach than general knowledge. How would this NEP change that environment for different subject teachers?
Well, I think that's it's a very interesting question. The environment in the school thus far has been that, a lot of stress has been given to the computer teacher, the maths teacher, the English language teacher, and it was usually the social science teacher and the others who were, I cannot say that they were far away, but they were not within the mainstream, so to say. But then we have to create this culture because it's a learning, the school is an institution, it's a learning institution. There were so many children there, there's so many teachers there. So therefore, every aspect, you're learning from that aspect, whether it's a drawing teacher, a dance teacher, or the GK teacher for that matter, or a substitute teacher. Everyone must be together. They must all be respected, regarded, and at the same level. You can't differentiate between one teacher and the other. And therefore, you have to create this culture in the school that every person is important. whether that person is a teacher, that person is a support staff, or that person is a student. So
So
therefore,
maybe,
the
so
culture is created.
yeah, so maybe that is going to be part of the professional development of school leaders. Uh, Mr. Jain, Mr. SL Jain, would you like to ask your question, sir?
Yeah, hello Atul. You are
How are
doing
you,
a
sir? How
wonderful
are you?
job. Hello Atul. It is wonderful attending the sessions Friday 5 p.m. and your speakers are really, really wonderful. They stimulate everyone and they excite everyone, and we go through a journey which perhaps we cannot otherwise undertake. Now, my question is, this NEP is going to be all over India. It is not going to be in few private schools or public schools or known schools and like that. There are tribal areas, there are deserts, there are backward areas, there are slums and all that, and all sort of schools are there. So I have three questions to the panelists. One is that how do we take the technology and training of technology to the masses, to those areas which are out of reach as of now, because it is not the technology that the school has, because it is all going to be capital intensive, and how to make available the devices, etc., also to the students. Second question is that how to make our teachers unlearn, because just now someone said that high payment and high salaries do not make better teachers, but better teachers should get better paid, they should be better paid. So when we are in the job for say 10, 20, 25 years, and I am 55-year-old, so I have such a great baggage with me, such a heavy baggage with me. So how do I unlearn those things? And lastly, which is most important, is how to find the trainers. You see, training mindset, because I was trying with my staff how to do the problem solving, because now the future education will demand how to help our children to train themselves in problem solving and decision making. So I just did a brainstorming session with them, and I found, in spite of, and our teachers are really very good, but they couldn't move much forward in suggesting ways and means how should we develop the attitude of problem solving. I mean, everyone is teaching the textbook for an examination and the activities that they have been doing for many, many years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I think these are brilliant questions. I doubt if any of our panelists have an answer to the first one. How do we make sure that technology reaches everybody in India? But what I would like to do is the second question is very interesting, and it comes up every time. Maya, I would like to ask you this. One of the big things about training or helping teachers learn new things is that they have to unlearn. How do you think that the best strategy is to do that? I mean, how do you make teachers unlearn what they have acquired over 25 years of teaching?
I know it's very difficult to shed conditioned practices, especially because you've gone through your schooling yourself, college, and teaching. You've been in the same sort of rut. So it's very difficult. But which is why just training programs does not suffice. And there are, clear models provided where you need to have a combination of training, demonstration, allowing teachers to practice it themselves, and coaching and mentoring. If you have a combination of these 3 or 4 aspects, attending training programs, the facilitator or the trainer demonstrating that particular skill and how it works in the classroom, then providing opportunities for the teacher to try it out in the class herself or himself, and then coaching and mentoring them over a certain period of time. That has been found to be successful across the world. And that has almost like a 90% efficacy rate. And I think that's what we need to, but we don't spend time. So if you talk about 50 hours or 100 hours, I would recommend about 100 hours. You need to incorporate all this into your continuing professional development. Then I think that there is a certain embedding of new learning that happens.
Yeah, so I'll just add to what you have said, and I can relate that from my own personal experience. When I just shared with you that I was teaching in India in a school in India in 1989, and then 1990 onwards I had to go and teach in the US. Now, there for one semester, because I was given that scholarship as a teaching assistant, for one semester, every week, we had to go through a orientation program which was designed for foreign teaching assistants. So with me, there were people from China, there were people from, obviously India, there were people from Latin American countries, uh, and they explained to us, the mentors there,
Yeah.
explained to us how it is difficult, how is different teaching in America uh, as compared to teaching in our own countries. And once we understood and once we were mentored, and we could come back and ask them any questions that they want. So that is how I learned. Because I'll give you a simple example just in 1 minute. The environment within a classroom in American college is very informal. A student can come in with his lunch box, a Coke. He can sit on the front row and pop open the Coke right in front of you and start drinking it while you're teaching him differentiation on the blackboard. Now, something like this would never ever happen in any classroom in India, whether college or whether school. Now, this was a great cultural shock for me when students started doing that. And I had to forget that I was ever teaching in India. I had to unlearn all those things and start looking at new perspectives. So, one of the things is a really regular program with new kinds of experiences have to be given to teachers to help them unlearn what they have acquired. The second question is also extremely important, and I'll take that to Vinita ma'am. Ma'am, I remember that you used to conduct training for so many programs. And for all those programs, you had to invite people, trainers to do that. But was it challenging? How did you find trainers for all those people? And can that solution be scaled up? Because I know there's a shortage of good teacher trainers and teacher educators. How did you do that?
Interesting question. Indeed, it was tough, but then we sorted it out over the years. Um, I worked in an organization that had tremendous wealth in terms of teachers and intellectual support. And with the DPS, we had a lot of teachers who had trained over the years, and they supported us at the Human Resource Development Center. So we created a design where, we had teachers, principals from the system itself, especially the older schools. Um, we are an organization that's almost 72, 74 years now. So we had legacy, and we had a lot of experimentation and experience. So therefore, we had a lot of people who could contribute to teacher development. And also we had trainers from the outside who pitched in, who contributed in their own ways. So looking around, it was really not difficult. It wasn't difficult to provide for trainers. Trainers came in themselves. We created a lot of trainers within the system, and therefore it was learning together. It was never, people from the outside teaching us what to do. It was all together. I'd also like to share, when you spoke about learning and unlearning, I have an important, and it's a very interesting situation. A school, suddenly when MI came in, multiple intelligences, and everyone is trying to unravel multiple intelligence. Okay, we were all teaching in the same way that everyone does, and MI came in, and it was to be used in the school. How was that to be done? So therefore, to create an MI school, there was a lot of hand holding, lot of discussions, lot of unlearning to do. First of all, to learn MI skills, and suddenly, over a period of time, with a lot of research, a lot of reading, putting MI into the lesson plan, understanding, from there, that an activity had to be designed for each each intelligence. So therefore, looking at activities, researching for activities, understanding how this activity is going to impact students, how is it going to be used in the classroom. Therefore, over a period of 2 to 3 months, the unlearning and the relearning happened. And suddenly the entire school was, focused on MI. Their lesson plans were all developed on MI, and they started teaching differently. It took a while. It did not happen over a day. It took about, say, 6 months for the entire school to turn into an MI school. So everything changed in the school system.
That's a great way to do it. And if you look at, I was just reading the chat also. There are some good suggestions there also, like creating a buddy system
Yes.
to take care of. Smita, I think, has said that. But I think it's important. And one other thing, Mr. Jan, I can add is that ICSL would be always willing to help any school which wants to find the right trainers for a particular thing. And I think if you guys, I mean, this is an open invitation to everybody. If you have some requirement, we can always find somebody who would be good to deliver that to your schools. Let me invite Cheryl Ramesh, and before Cheryl begins, I want to remind you that at 6 o'clock, there's going to be a link in the chat which will take you to a quiz which has 5 questions based on today's topic of discussion. And once you get, if you're the first one to get 5 out of 5, you get a surprise gift from us. Cheryl, go ahead. Ask your question.
Good evening to all. Ma'am, I'm from Bangalore, and the thing is, since a lot of restructuring of the teachers has to take place, I just wanted to make sure whether NEP gives a certain way where it is ensured that the schools are following the structure that NEP wants. Like, for example, in some of the down schools, they might not exactly follow what the NEP expects from the school. So how will the NEP actually make sure that all the schools follow the same standards?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Who's that addressed to?
So Maya, I think you can take it up.
Anyone can answer, ma'am.
Sure. Okay, all right. I'm happy to answer, Cheryl, since you're from my city also. I don't think the NEP can dictate what individual schools can do. NEP is a national document from the central government. Even the states can decide what they want to do with the NEP. I think what every school, and it behoves upon every school and every state government to do, is to think about it, use the NEP as an approach, as a policy paper to do, to transform and improve their school system or their individual institution. I don't think the NEP can be mandated on every individual school. I don't think that works, because there are some states who have said that, no, we don't like this about the NEP and so on. And since education is on the concurrent list, the center can't insist that a state follow the NEP to the T. But I'm sure the Kendriya Vidyalaya schools and all will be following it. I'm quite positive about that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, I might want to add here to what Maya said is that, when I look at NEP, I don't look at it as the Indian Penal Code that has to be, enforced on me. I look at NEP as a great suggestive document, and I need to pick out, as a teacher or as a principal, I need to pick out elements from the NEP which may help my students, and then figure out a way to implement them. So I think the onus should lie on us as educators to implement the NEP without somebody coming and checking whether we are doing it or no. Because if I want my students to develop mathematical thinking or scientific temper, or as Mr. Jain said, problem solving skills, why do I need for someone to come and see whether I'm doing it or no? It's my school. I want the best for my kids, and therefore I will do that. So the last question that I have is very interesting. I want to put them both to Maya, you, as well as Vinita ji. So this is Vibha Varaj from Delhi, and she submitted a question. Money is a great challenge for schools for providing teacher training. So how do schools stop looking at training as an expense and start looking at training money as an investment? How do we make school leaders and management make that transition? Vinita ji, you want to go first?
Okay, that's a tough question. It's a very, very tough question. But yes, now is the right time. It has to be budgeted for right from the beginning. One. Two, the importance of training has to be um, brought forth in the school system, and all managements must understand that to have teachers training, to have teachers who've learned little more than the usual because times are changing is important. It's imperative right now. And therefore, again, like I said, use the NEP and use the COVID time to understand that teacher training is an important part of school education. When you're budgeting for students, when you're budgeting for foreign trips, this, that, teacher education should be an important part of the budget. And it has to be a culture in the school. It's a system. It has to be a learning school. The moment you create it into a learning school, a system which is learning, everybody is learning in it. Therefore, then this learning also becomes a part of, when you're going out and learning or you're training becomes a part of learning. So that has to be created in the school. It has to be a culture of learning. The school is a learning organization, and even not just students, it's also teachers who have to learn.
Great. And Maya, how do you convince school managements to pay for training?
I completely agree with Vinita about this. I think we must not see teachers as an expense. Teachers are a huge, important investment. And I think one needs to remember from across the world that the single critical factor that enhances school student learning and the school itself and the reputation of a school is the quality of teachers and teaching in the school. So if that's the case, we need to invest. So private schools need to invest. Of course, low-cost private schools are absolutely strung up for money. So you need to look at a model of the teachers contributing and then the teachers being paid back based on the teacher's service. There are some models that low-cost private schools do when we work with them, where the school pays part of it, the teacher pays part of it, but the school pays it back to the teachers based on how many years they stay on. If they stay on at least 2 years after the training, then the entire payment is paid back to the school, to the teacher. And I think that's a model that would work while we figure out how schools can set aside a budget for training. In the same way as the country needs a budget for education, schools need a budget for professional development of its teaching staff.
So I have a welcome addition to my panel. Mrs. Aditi Mishra, she is the principal of 3PS Gurgaon, and she was on our panel a few weeks ago. And I think she would like to answer this question also. So Aditi, over to you.
Hi, Atul. Hi, Maya. Seeing you after long, and Vinita is a very dear friend. So I just wanted to chip in on this one. I think most schools have now developed what they call a teacher resource center. So teacher resource center looks after all the trainings, and teachers should willingly want to go for the training. I mean, it's for their own enhancement, their own skill building. So I have never in the past 20 years forced any teacher to do any training. They come in voluntarily. Sometimes we have to say no because a trainer wants only 20 or 25. And yes, like Maya said, teachers pay some bit of it and school pays the other part of it. We don't give it back to the teacher because I feel that when she's getting a certificate, it's going to help her. Why should the school take on the onus completely? And today, I think we go way beyond our budget. And if the teachers were not chipping in, it would be impossible to, do so many trainings. And again, like I said, there are trainers and there are trainers. So Maya did a training with us, I think 19 years ago, which is still spoken about. We've tried to reach out to her, but she's so busy in Bangalore that she doesn't get time to come to Gurgaon.
So we now do online training. We are happy to do it.
Yes.
We'll do
Yes,
it offline for
absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
Great.
That will be
So,
lovely.
so thank you, Aditi. Thank you for
Thank you.
coming on. And I think it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to everybody and some very, very wonderful questions. And it's time for us to wrap up the show today. I'm sorry if I could not take any more questions, and but I'll take more next time. Next week is Gandhi Jayanti. We are having a Gandhi Jayanti special episode. And since it's 2nd October, I'm very sure you're going to be home, relaxed. Yeah. So do join us Friday at 5, Gandhi Jayanti, to talk about inclusive education, things that actually matter to Gandhiji. Luckily, chapter 6 is going to be taken over. But before you leave, click on the Google link in the chat, finish the question, be the first one to get 5 out of 5. I'll see you next week. Thank you very much for logging in.